A world of runaway design, where the lines between technology and humanity are blurring every day, where computers think on our behalf, and where people use DNA splicing to speed up the pace of evolution. How will we build a world worth living in? Assembling Tomorrow, a book that will teach you to see the unseen and find hidden opportunities lurking beneath the mess of today's technology. Assembling Tomorrow, a guide to designing a thriving future. On sale now, wherever books are sold.
It's really cool to have to have a co-author that you don't want to let down. Right, like, I think that's what it comes down to, right? Because it's not a competition, but it's like, I need to put my best thing out there because I know that he is, right? And like, if we can both do that together, this thing's really going to sing.
And one of the things that people have said about the book when they read it is how it feels like it's one voice. And I think it does, but when we were writing it, it didn't feel that way at all, right? Like we have very similar ethos, like we care about the same things, but a very different way of looking at it. And so I don't think we would have gotten to the shared vision. There's no way that either of us would have written this book.
I think another thing we notice is that people are maybe reading a little differently than just straight start to finish of a book. And so we aim to create something that would be great if you went that way, but also if you just wanted to read a story, you could, or if you wanted to jump around, you could, or you could use an illustration as a place to lock in and then read forwards and backwards from there. So it was about trying to meet that change in reading behavior too.
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. You know, it's really great when you reach out and you see your emails come in and somebody's like, I'd love to come on the show. You're like, oh, great. And then wait, there's two people in the email. You're like, hang on, what's going on? And they share a similar email address. You're like, did I just win something? Like, how is this happening? I have two people at once who want to come on and talk about their book, co-authors on their new book together. It came out in June, and we're excited to have them here on the show. You're going to learn a lot. And imagine taking two books, two different types of books, putting them together into one, getting an amazing illustrator and wrapping it all up in a bow. That's what we got for you here on the podcast. Carissa and Scott are both here. You're going to learn a lot from two amazing people, and I'm so excited to have them on the show. Carissa, Scott, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Happy to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Awesome. Okay, let's start with an introduction for everyone. Carissa, we'll start with you. Can you introduce yourself and kind of a little bit about your background and where you are in this big world of ours?
Yeah, I'm Carissa Carter. I am the academic director at the Stanford University D School, where D stands for design. I'm a designer, I'm an author, and I'm also a geoscientist. And I'm joined here by my colleague, Scott Doorley.
Yeah, I'm the creative director at the Stanford D School. I work with Carissa, and we teach design in a really, really broad way. We think of it as, how do you bring a new idea into the world? And so we work with students from around the university to bring their ideas to life. And I started out as a filmmaker, and I've been designing now for a couple decades.
Wow. Okay, I love filmmakers. That's a great, very interesting, the two of you together. What is the connection besides sharing a similar email address and working together at the school? What else connects the two of you together? Scott, what do you think about that?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think both of us are really curious people, and both of us like to try things we've never done before, which is sort of the ethos of the place that we work at. I mean, this is the longest I've worked anywhere in my life by a factor of 10. So, I worked at 20th Century Fox Movie Studios for about 2 years, and that was my previous longest job. And I think the thing that's kept me here is the fact that we get to tackle new and different problems all the time. And I would guess that Carissa feels the same way.
Carissa, you got to jump in. Yeah, what else?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that I've been at the D School now for over 10 years, and it's really about the people and the collaborations. And Scott is right. Like when he and I work together, we often approach problems from different perspectives, but we have shared goals, right? Like we know we want to get somewhere, and we know that we both bring our own, history and points of view, and maybe even assumptions about how a problem needs to work. And the fun of it is when we can pull that stuff apart and then rebuild something new together. Like, for example, when we wrote this book, it took like 10 different structures before we landed on, oh, this is the shape of the book. The chapters were going to be this one way, and then they were another way. And then we had to like deconstruct the whole thing and really even figure out what it was even about all over again. And that's the fun of working together.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting connection. I like how the two of you've kind of joined forces together on this. Do you think, either one of you, do you think that you would have written this book on your own? Or do you think that you needed each other to write this? Carissa, what do you think about that?
I don't think either of us could have written it on our own.
Okay.
We could have each written a different book on our own, but we had this happen a few times as we wrote, where we would meet up and we'd say, all right, well, we're gonna write about this AI technology, and we'd each go take a stab at it and come together. And we both have very interesting things, and they'd be so different. Right. And like figuring out how to weave it together and what the actual story should be was really challenging and really rewarding.
And one of the things that people have said about the book when they read it is how it feels like it's one voice. And I think it does. But when we were writing it, it didn't feel that way at all. Right. Like we have very similar ethos. Like we care about the same things, but a very different way of looking at it. And so I don't think we would have gotten to the shared vision. There's no way that either of us would have written this book.
Scott, what stands out for you about Carissa that makes her unique as a writing partner? Let's brag on Carissa for a moment. What stands out for you? What stands out for you?
I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So this gets into it, like where I think we have the same ethos. We care about the same things, but I think, and I don't know if Carissa would agree, but from my perspective, Carissa, she thinks in spatial relationships. Like everything's kind of a relationship. It's like, how does this compare to that? She teaches a class on data, and it's about data visualization, how you tell stories with data. And so much of it is about like, how do you break things down? How do you then construct new models of those things? How do you see things in this very expansive kind of always open, but very clear way of looking at things? A lot of people think in arguments where it's like, it's about this and this means that, and this logic goes that way, and that conclusion is this. And the way I love that Carissa kind of communicates is to show all of it and how it interrelates, and then bring out what's interesting about it without really forcing you to decide what's right or what the perfect thing is. Or, it's just this way of thinking about relationships and things that like is extraordinary. I don't know anyone else who thinks like that.
Okay, so I'm going to throw now to Carissa for Scott. Besides Scott's smoky inner world voice, what else stands out for you about Scott? What does he bring to this? And, what do you really admire about Scott?
Well, first, aw shucks. Thanks, Scott. Those are kind words. And
it's for real.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that the cool corollary to that is in this, speaks to Scott's filmmaking background too, is his ability to craft a narrative is really unsurpassed. Right. And he sees not only like what the story should be, but he sees like even if we're working on something that's like very researchy in nonfiction, he finds the human story behind where that thing came from. And all throughout all of our drafts, he just kept doing that, whether at a small scale and be like, this person who's a physicist, like, and also writes cartoons in their free time, like finding those kind of those sides of people that like really make them a whole person and not just the thing that they do, all the way down to larger narratives about backstories of where different phenomena came from, really like rounding out the details so you feel like you are there in the moment. And I just learned something new from him every single time I was reading one of his drafts and it was like, oh, I gotta live up to that caliber of storytelling, right? And like I loved like working with somebody that has that type of skill. And it's one of the many things I really admire about him.
There you go. Scott, would you like to respond to Carissa? No.
No doubt about it. First of all, I'll give my own shucks, but like, you know what's so cool about this conversation, David, is we've been working together for a long time, about a decade maybe. I don't know. I haven't tracked it. And then we worked on this book intensely for 2 years. And then we've been doing, since probably May, really, like all these appearances in the book tour, and we've never been able to have this conversation, right? And the thing I love is like you talk about reading my drafts, which is super flattering that you would have been like, I don't know, egged on to live up to, or I'm doing air quotes right now. But I felt the same way. Like I would get something back and I'm like, oh man, how do I, the level of insight was so high that I was like, how am I going to compete with this? So it's not even competing, but like live up to it, like how am I going to make sure that my stuff is as good as this stuff? So it's really cool to be able to talk about that because I think we were both thinking it.
Yeah, like to have a co-author that you don't want to let down. Right. Like, I think that's what it comes down to, right? Because it's not a competition, but it's like, I need to put my best thing out there because I know that he is, right? And like, if we can both do that together, this thing's really going to sing.
You're both inspiring the greatness within each of you by working together. So for an author that's listening who is contemplating writing and co-authoring with someone, is there one advantage and maybe one difficulty you're going to need to address? Is there anything we can give to an author that would help them in their journey as a co-author? Carissa, anything that comes to mind?
Well, I'll say that I think you've heard a lot of the advantages that came from our relationship. So if I just start with what's hard is that I think we would both agree it's probably twice as much work as writing solo. And that's because you not only have to like think through what is the book even about, like what are the ideas and agree on that, but then you have to write the thing and have like figure out how the writing styles come together. Do you sound like one? Are you trading off chapters, right? And it sounds choppy to a reader, I think, if it doesn't feel cohesive. And that takes a lot of work, a lot of work.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, I was going to say the definite benefit is the like pushing each other's, like I feel like our ideas got way further than they would have. And also the writing, I think for me at least, went way beyond because Carissa's also an excellent writer. So I'd be inspired by the way she's writing and it would push my writing in new directions. So I think the benefit you get is that the book gets better. If you're willing to put up with the difficulty, which I think there's another level of difficulty in there, which is you're trying to merge ideas. And I heard Zadie Smith wrote an article about how fiction should be like a representation of the author's consciousness. And I think that's kind of right. It's like you're feeling the character and how they think. And a good book is like really getting into intimately how you think. So if the act of being an author is about like very intimately expressing what you think, well, if you're working with someone else, as you get to those levels of intimacy, you're naturally going to diverge because you're different people. And then so it's a lot of work to sort of pull that back together. Absolutely worth the effort, but it's a lot of work, as Carissa was saying.
Okay, so we're going to do something real time, which will be interesting. I'm going to put Scott on the spot, but I'm going to give you a chance to think about this. Okay, Scott. So I'm going to go to Carissa and ask her a question. But while I'm talking to Carissa, I want you to create for me a little movie trailer for this book. Talking to the audience who's a reader. I do want you to say "in a world." Okay, I do want you to say that. Right, and then you're going to give me a little promo for the book because I just want to hear. I want to hear more of that voice, selfishly. But two, I'm going to pull in your filmmaking background a little bit and talk to the reader about this book. Who this book is for? What's the big idea? Just something short. Okay. I selfishly want to have that. So I'll let you work on that while I talk to Carissa.
It's going to be so good. I can't wait.
Right? I'm so excited about this.
I feel like you've set me up too much now, Carissa. The unparalleled storytelling.
I'm so excited for whatever is going to happen.
Yes, me too.
This cool thing.
Right.
So you work on that mentally as we kind of go through this. But Carissa, for the readers listening, tell us the name of the book and kind of your thoughts as like a big picture idea of who this book is for. I want the readers to connect with you, both of you, but let's talk to the reader. What is this book, the title, and kind of what is the big idea?
The book is called Assembling Tomorrow, and it's a guide to designing a thriving future. So Scott and I are both educators, as you've heard, and we're in the field of making things. We teach students how to build and create pretty much anything from technologies to products to services and experiences. And even for us being in this field, like the world can feel quite overwhelming right now. The technology that we're making with has lots of potential for good, but also potential for harm. We know that our climate is in dire straits, and we're, able to do things like edit genetic code, and we release algorithms that are able to replicate and learn on their own in the world. And it can really feel like all of this is happening to us. But we're makers. Again, we teach design, and we know how much agency we all have as individuals. So we wrote this book to call attention to the urgency of what can really feel like an unsettling moment, and to pave a path forward that any of us can take on.
I think the unique thing that the two of you have as an option is you can make this a required reading for your course and make your students buy your own book, which is interesting, which you probably wouldn't do. But hey, everyone, you have to buy my book, so we're going to sell books just by putting it into the course. But I'm like, that's an interesting way of thinking of it. You could sell books that way, but this is not a textbook, though, right, Chris?
It is not a textbook. It is really written for anybody who cares about the world, right? So it is definitely written for a general audience. It's not a textbook. We say that, even if you don't consider yourself a designer, we probably consider you a designer. We believe that everything in the world has been designed, from the technology that you're holding to the schedule that you might make to get your kids to school and to their after school activities. Like, that was designed, to the next meeting that you have at work. How you run that meeting is designed. So design takes many forms, and we're all making things. So if you identify with somebody that makes anything, this book's for you.
Carissa, what for you makes you happy knowing this book is in the world? Like, what's the satisfaction level for you that your message is out there now?
I'm thrilled the book is out there. One thing that happened as we were writing it, which the bulk of our writing work happened like 2021 through 2023-ish. And that's a time of rapid change with regard to technology, right? We're all familiar with the generative AI boom that happened. And as Scott and I were working, much of that during like parts of COVID, where it also felt like, oh my gosh, like things are happening at a global scale. A lot of what we were writing about felt like it was coming true, right? we would start writing about something as if like it's in the near future, and then it would just happen, right? So it has felt like the future is happening faster and faster, right? Like things are coming at us at a faster speed. And so on one hand, it's really nice to have the book out there because it's now like a stick and we can talk about it. But also because like we can now, we have a lot of reference points for the phenomena that we do see happening. We can connect it back to the book and further those conversations with other people that are experiencing it in similar or different ways, because really, we believe in like a collective shared future and not just one vision.
Yeah, I think the whole thing that we went through as a world with the pandemic and everything really did push some people who may not be as receptive to technology and advancements in technology kind of at a necessity we all learned how to use Zoom, for example. When some people are like dragging their feet in here going, oh, I don't want to know this new thing, but I'm working from home, so I'm going to have to learn how to do this. So it kind of brought everyone to a different level. I think everybody kind of stepped up a little bit just out of, because you had to, you didn't really have an option. But then all these tools that come in to support us now and take some of the mundane things that we might do day to day, simplify them and make them easier for everyone. It allows us time to dream about something else now that we would not have time to do. So there's a lot of advantages, but I think some people are just nervous around the climate of technology and kind of what's happening to us, like you mentioned. It just kind of feels a little bit like it's like a Tesla that's on auto drive and you're not really in control. And you're like, I hope the car stops at this next light because I have no idea, right? Because it's kind of driving you. So nervous about that.
So without knowing it, you pretty much just said one of the main metaphors that we like to use to talk about this book. So we talk about this phenomena happening in the world right now that we call runaway design. And we liken that to a runaway train, which is your Tesla and autopilot, right? Like when there's a runaway train though, like it's flying down the tracks, and if it crashes, like at least you see it and you see the destruction that is caused and you can attend to it. What's happening right now in our runaway design world is that those tracks are invisible. That train's probably invisible. And if something goes wrong with a technology, a lot of the times you don't actually know it went wrong until we see the effects of what just happened, right? We don't quite have a handle on the tech that is really accelerating quite rapidly. And that kind of sets this moment apart and is why we all need to participate and be in tune with what's happening and feel like we all have a voice.
Interesting. And to expand on that railway thought, there's also the dead man switch, which the engineer has their foot on the pedal. And as soon as they take their foot off, the train starts slowing. Right.
1,000%.
Right.
1,000%. Yeah, that's such a great build. It's such a great build. Right. But if you don't even know if there is a switch, right, then how do we even know to slow it?
Okay. Well, I see Scott like busily working in the background while we're chatting. Scott, are you ready for your little intro here?
I mean, ready. I'm not sure ready is the right word, but I'm done. I've written something.
I saw your head bobbing up and down as you're typing. I'm like, this is going to be great. No pressure.
I fear. No, I'm gonna have fun with it, but I fear it'll. What's the word? I fear it's going to sound more like infomercial than movie trailer. But we'll see how it goes.
Okay, everyone. Scott's here. He's going to give you a brief synopsis. Chris has done an amazing job already, but Scott's going to wind up here and come into the room. Carissa and I are both excited about this because we have no idea what's going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
Carissa, do you want to introduce Scott as he introduced the little trailer to the book? You introduce Scott, Carissa.
Ladies and gentlemen, people of all genders, please join your hands together and welcome Mr. Scott Doorley.
A world of runaway design, where the lines between technology and humanity are blurring every day, where computers think on our behalf, and where people use DNA splicing to speed up the pace of evolution. How will we build a world worth living in? Assembling Tomorrow, a book that will teach you to see the unseen and find hidden opportunities lurking beneath the mess of today's technology. Assembling Tomorrow, a guide to designing a thriving future. On sale now, wherever books are sold.
Carissa, are you happy with that? What do you think?
I mean, come on. I don't even know what the word said, but yeah, I would buy it. I would buy it just based on the intonation and like I was there 1,000%.
Oh man, I have popcorn spilled all over me. Oh, that was so good, Scott. That was so good. And talk about putting you on the spot. Well done to step up.
Yeah, when you said you were putting me on the spot, I didn't quite realize you were putting me on the spot. I leaned in. It might have been hot on the microphone.
No,
I don't
good.
know.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well done. Well done.
I think you're offering to do it again if it was,
No.
is that what you're saying? Okay.
I was,
Okay.
but I don't know that it's needed. If it's not needed, we should spare ourselves, all of us.
Everyone listening at home, you're like, I think I just found my next voiceover talent. Scott's got time. He's got the book out. He's got nothing going on right now.
Yeah.
He's looking for a side hustle.
ScottDoorleyVoiceover.com.
There you go.
Man.
I like it. Carissa, do you approve of that? Was that good? That was fine.
Oh, it was excellent.
Come on,
I think I'll highlight one thing he said in there was a book that allows you to see the unseen, and I love that line.
I think that's your line. I think I might have snagged that line from you, so I can see why you love it.
So I'm just flattering myself. Is what
you're just flattering yourself.
Here we are.
While you were working on that, you were half listening to our conversation. Anything kind of pop up for you as we kind of listened to Carissa earlier that you might want to add to around the theme of the book and expand a little bit more on your beautiful movie trailer there? But for that reader that's listening and contemplating buying this book or giving it to someone else that they know and love, can you just talk a little bit more about, who your target audience is and really how you want to connect with them through the book?
Yeah, well, just getting into the premise of the book, we both mentioned runaway design, and that's what we're trying to say is this is a special moment. This is different. And that moment can feel very overwhelming. But we all have agency, maybe not in building the technologies or dealing with the social media or the politics or the climate change. We might not have the ability to change it, but we can decide how we interact with it, and we can decide what to do with it, and we can imagine what could be possible and what comes out of it. And we can demand what people should do with it versus just kind of getting caught by what it can do. So really the point is, like, we hope anyone who feels like they have a role in shaping the future, which is a lot more people than I think consider themselves as having that role, right? So teachers shape the future, leaders shape the future, people who have podcasts shape the future, because we're all changing each other's consciousness. And once we think a certain way, we can see opportunities differently. And the hope is that this book can help you do that. Hope in the dark.
There you go. Carissa, any epiphanies come to you in the process of writing the book where you're like, oh, wow. Like you sit up straight and go, hang on. I think we just found something here. We found a little nugget. Anything stand out to you during the process of writing it?
Yeah. So the other layer that's within this book, which is very much a nonfiction book, is that it is interspersed with 20 speculative fiction stories that we've written that really cross the entire book. And what they do, they're very short stories, and they bring moments to life that, we'll be talking about a phenomenon in the nonfiction, and then you'll read a story. And that story takes place about 20-ish to 50-ish years in the future, and it's an everyday moment. And by writing those stories, it allows us to try on futures and see if we like how we feel about them. And when you think, about a moment in the future and you have to write about it, you bring in people's personalities, you start to wrestle with the interpersonal dynamics that may come to pass. And you get a lot more out when you're trying on these future moments in fiction format. And to me, that was one of the most fun elements in writing. I think Scott would agree. Like, we both really liked writing the fiction, because I know that for me personally, like, that's where those epiphanies came from. It's like when I'm writing a story that like pushes the limits of data privacy and like what would feel really out of control to me, and like how would people react differently in that world, like when I'm taking ideas to that level, like that's when all my epiphany moments would happen. So yeah, fiction always.
Right. Scott, same question. Any epiphanies in the process? You're like, wow, I think we touched on something here.
Yeah. I mean, I think in every chapter, there was a moment where usually toward the end of writing the chapter, something would kind of just like pop out. I remember this one sentence was, if we have a chapter on feelings and how much feelings sort of motivate people to create things in the world. And we got to the point where we were talking about necessity being the mother of invention. And it was, if necessity is the mother of invention, feelings are the father. And that just kind of like popped out, but it pops out in the same way Carissa's talking about writing the stories. You have to like go to a level of detail and get immersed in the topic so much that it just kind of bubbles to the top. I don't think you can like force that. It just kind of comes out. And that was true with the stories too. I was listening to, I'd go back and try to like listen to some of the stories so I can like work on my own writing. And I was listening to one the other day and I was like, oh, that's about that. I didn't even quite realize my own story was about a certain thing until I listened to it, I don't know, 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. The one thing unique about the book too, Carissa, you showed me on screen some of the cover and inside the book. Talk about your illustrator, talk about the aesthetics of the book as well, because you seem both very proud of that as a component of this book. It's its own story within the book itself, just how it's put together. So let's shout out your illustrator and all of that. I'd love to give them some credit, but let's talk about why you designed the book to not be a traditional, white page, black lettering, traditional book. There's a lot of interesting components to why you did what you did. Can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, our illustrator is Armando Veve, and Armando created a huge series of original charcoal illustrations that open each chapter, that are full color spreads and open each part of the book, and a bunch of spot illustrations as well. And in each of his illustrations, they're not simple line drawings. It's like the opposite of a simple line drawing, where he's taken ideas that happen in that chapter and recombined them into, I don't know how to even describe like what the right parallel is. He's created a new shape, a new amalgamation, and he's drawn that, right? So there's an eagle attacking a drone in the sky that talks of like, which is referencing what happens in the fiction chapter, right? But like he's given it this texture that we could never have otherwise. And so it's worth reading our book even if you only want to look at the pictures, because they're so gorgeous.
Scott, how do you work with an illustrator while writing the book at the same time? Like, are you giving the illustrator portions of the book so they can go and do their thing while you go write the next chapter? Like, or are you delayed in releasing a book because you're waiting for your illustrator to come back to you? Like, what's that working relationship look like with an illustrator?
One of the things for context is that this is part of a series of books that we wrote at the Stanford D School, and there are 12 of them, and all of them have illustrators. And working with each illustrator was a different thing. So some really want just to execute on the direction you want to give them. Some don't want any direction at all. They just want to do their own thing. With Armando, it was very much in between, where we found his work and we just wanted his interpretation of our work, like we just wanted his work in the book. And so we were just open to whatever he would bring. But then he brought this just incredible curiosity to like, what are you trying to do here? What are you actually thinking about when you say this story? So Carissa wrote a story that's about sort of like a hidden language that gets uncovered. And he was trying to figure out like, well, what would be the historically accurate version of the language that I should put into the drawing? And so he went and researched like different forms of cuneiform that would then fit into the drawing. And it was just like unbelievable. So, and then the guy, you'll see his drawings. I mean, he's just technically, he's a wonder. So with him, it was really just about like throwing the ideas around and then letting him run with it. So it was real collaboration on what would be in there. And then his execution was, we just gave him tons of rope to do whatever he wanted.
Okay. That's an interesting dynamic, because there's that third person part of the process, right? The two of you have to organize yourselves and work together, but then you have this extra person that's part of it. And I would say equally part of it, not just an add-on afterthought. This is really a thoughtful way of writing the book and producing the book. I really love how you've brought in a variety of people to take us through this. I think that's a superpower for the three of you for this book. That's exciting.
I think another thing we notice is that people are maybe reading a little differently than just straight start to finish of a book. And so we aim to create something that would be great if you went that way, but also if you just wanted to read a story, you could, or if you wanted to jump around, you could, or you could use an illustration as a place to lock in and then read forwards and backwards from there. So it was about trying to meet that change in reading behavior too.
This has been great for the two of you to come on. Again, seeing that email come in with both of you on the email, I'm like, what craziness is going to ensue from this email? I love this, that I have two authors at the same time to talk to. I really love the interaction between the two of you, even just here on the show, and seeing the two of you discover stuff about each other in the conversation is fun for me as well as the host. But as we kind of wrap up, Scott, your love letter to the readers for this book, and kind of what is your big overall arching hope for them as a reader as they open this book for the first time? I'm imagining them, it's in their lap, they're ready to open the cover for the first time, they've never read it yet, and before they read a word, your thought for them, what would you like to say to them?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all feel like the world is happening to us a little bit, especially right now. And my hope would be that you can sit with this book and just find a little more space and find a little more sense of possibility, and then just really enjoy the things that have come out of the making of this book. So like these incredible illustrations by Armando and some of the fiction stories, and don't feel like you even have to finish it. Just take what you want from it and run with it.
And Carissa, same thing for you. Your love letter to a reader. What do you want to say?
Well, I hope it's an escape, for however long you have with it in your lap. I hope that time feels like you're in a bubble with it while you have it. And I also hope that you start noticing like one thing differently in your everyday life after you've read what's in here. Like maybe you're paying attention to how much make-believe is in the world around us, or you're noticing how everything is interconnected in a way that you had never noticed before, or how one thing flows to the next.
Carissa, where do we connect with the two of you as around the book, as far as finding the book? Is there a website associated to the book as well? Where would you like to send a listener for further conversation with you after this?
Yeah, dschool, one word, no dot there, dschool.stanford.edu/books. We'll have this book and all of the other Stanford D-School books in the 12-book series that Scott referenced. And then you can find both of us on LinkedIn.
Excellent. Scott, anything else you want to send people?
No, that's great. I mean, you can buy it at your favorite bookseller. You can just go right there. It's assembling tomorrow. And then David, you mentioned you enjoyed listening to us kind of connect with each other. And I think you created a conversation for us to do that. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Excellent. Yeah, I love listening to the two of you together, and I love how you play off each other. And I think this is a really wise path that you've chosen together to write this book together. Let's close off with this one last question as we leave. Carissa, the name of my show is Living the Next Chapter. So I got to ask, how are you personally living your next chapter? What's next?
Well, very literally, the next chapter I'm reading, I'm really deep in a book of essays, Virginia Woolf essays right now. So that's, to me, I've been a little bit on a Virginia Woolf bender.
Nice. Scott, for yourself, how are you living your next chapter? What's next for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always love to kind of think about like how the last thing prepares you for the next thing. And I do feel like there's some more writing on the way, but I can't quite figure out what it is. But I can feel it bubbling up in there. So I'm just trying to explore.
Well, you're going to be so busy with voiceover work that you're going to have time to write anything else.
I would love to do voiceover work. Are you kidding? Just talk. I have to say, this is the dorkiest thing ever, but like I have very specific microphones that I love sound. I just love what sound does. So maybe that's it.
Maybe the two of you start a podcast. There you go. And
There
then
you
we'll have
go.
you guys
There you
listening
go. It's
all the
contagious.
time. It's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you stand next to me for more than 5 minutes, you'll start a podcast. So
You've already done it 8 times.
Yeah. I am in counseling for that. Thank you for that. It's great to have you both here on the show. Super excited to have you here. You're both very creative. I feel like you poked me in the brain today, which is a good thing. I feel smarter just having the two of you here. So where there's a podcast called Smartless, I think we're smarter just by having the two of you on the show. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks so much for having us, Davis. It's been really fun.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, David.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.